A woman is found stabbed on a rural road at 5 a.m. No weapon, no phone, no identification. The ground around her is completely undisturbed. No drag marks, no tire tracks, no signs of a struggle, just a body and a silence that felt deliberate. The only thing on her was a small paper ticket tucked into the pocket of her jeans, a coat check slip from a hotel downtown. That one slip of paper would expose a 2-year conspiracy involving fake property deals, a stolen fortune, and a man who had been drugged every night for months without knowing it. But here is what stopped investigators cold. Her husband swore she was in bed next to him when she died. He was telling the truth. It was a cold morning, just days before the new year. A taxi driver was heading out on his early shift when he spotted something at the side of the road. A woman lying face down near the road's edge, dumped in the open like she was nothing. He could tell other people had passed, drivers, maybe pedestrians. No one had stopped. He stopped. He drove to the nearest police station and reported what he saw. Officers arrived, confirmed the scene, and called it in. A woman was dead. Investigators were on their way. When the detectives arrived, they found a young woman, somewhere in her late 20s or early 30s. She was wearing a thin, light blouse, a pair of blue jeans, and high-heeled shoes. No coat, no scarf, no gloves. In deep winter cold, she was dressed like she had stepped out for a summer evening. Her face was bruised. Her body had been through violence. She had 2 stab wounds in the chest, both in the region of the heart. Both were fatal. Blood had spread across the ground around her, but the scene itself told almost nothing. No sign of a struggle. The gravel and dirt around her were undisturbed. No footprints, no tire marks, no hair caught on anything, no torn fabric, no scuff marks. The woman had not been killed here, and whoever brought her had been careful not to leave a single trace. The location added another layer. It was a stretch of road 16 kilometers outside the city, in an area with no pedestrian traffic. You could not walk there, not at night, not in that cold, not dressed like that. She had been driven here and left. The forensic team swept the ground. Nothing usable. No wallet, no phone, no identification anywhere on her body. They tried fingerprints. No match in the system. The woman had no name yet. Then, working through her pockets, someone checked the small inner pocket of her jeans. A slip of paper. A ticket, the kind you receive at a hotel coat check when you leave your belongings. On it, handwritten, the name Raja. A black bag. A coat. That was the first lead. The detectives drove to the hotel. At the front desk, they showed the ticket. The staff confirmed it. This was their coat check system. A woman had left items the previous night. The attendant who had been on duty was called in. She confirmed everything. The woman had arrived late in the evening, alone, and left her belongings at the coat check before going inside. The coat was still there. A long black wool coat, heavy, expensive, the kind that costs what a working person earns in a month. The bag was still there too, a designer leather handbag, well beyond what most people could casually afford. Inside the bag, some cash, cosmetics, and a national identity card. The name matched the ticket. The woman was 28 years old. The address on the card was from a different city, far from here. And tucked inside the bag was a receipt, a restaurant receipt from a seafood place in the city. It was itemized, various types of fish, several portions. The total came to a price that, for a single meal, was on the high end, the kind of restaurant where people go to celebrate or impress. Stamped, marked, paid. Now, the detectives had two threads to pull. They split into teams. One would travel to the city, listed on the identity card, to locate the woman's family. The other would go to the seafood restaurant. The restaurant was easy to find. The owner's son, a young man in his mid-20s, was behind the counter when the detectives walked in. They showed him the receipt. He recognized it immediately. "I know this receipt," he said, "but I don't know the woman's name. She used to come in regularly, always with her husband." He described the routine. The couple would arrive together. The husband would sit down at a table. The woman would come to the counter herself, place the full food order, and then say, "Someone is coming later to pay. Give him this receipt when he arrives." The husband would never stay to eat with them. He always came separately, picked up the receipt, paid for everything, and left. "Same man every time," the young man said. "Young, dark hair, no beard, nothing unusual about his face. I never knew his name." The relationship between this man and the woman? He had no idea. The detectives noted it and moved on to the second team's findings. They had located the husband. He lived in a large private villa in the city. Officers knocked. A man answered the door, visibly unsettled, eyes unfocused, moving like someone who had not slept. He was 62 years old. "Where is your wife?" they asked. He said he did not know. He woke up that morning and she was not there. He assumed she had gone out somewhere early. "Was she home last night?" "Yes," he said. "We had dinner together. We went to sleep in the same bed." He was certain of this, but the hotel attendant had placed the woman there late that night, alone, dressed to go out. The two accounts could not both be true. The detectives requested permission to search the house. Authorization came through. They went in. The house was normal, large, comfortable. No signs of a fight, no blood, nothing out of place. The crime had not happened here. But in one room, they found cash, a large amount, stacked and wrapped in plastic, organized into neat bundles, the equivalent of roughly $20,000, sitting in a room of a private home. "Whose money is this?" they asked. "Mine," the husband said. "My savings." "What do you do?" "I own rental properties, shops, some land." They pressed him about his wife. Did she drink? He said absolutely not. Did she go out alone at night? He looked genuinely confused by the question. The medical examiner had already established that the woman died sometime between 3 and 5 in the morning, and that she had a significant amount of alcohol in her system. The nightclub she had been seen at closed at 4. She had left before closing, and someone had called her phone right before she walked out. The bartender who had been working that night confirmed it. A woman matching her description was seated inside when her phone rang. She looked at the screen, stood up immediately, and walked out while already talking. She never came back. That phone call was the last known contact before her death. The husband's story came out slowly, across several interviews. He had spent his entire adult life working, alone. He never married young. He built up what he had, quietly, over decades, a collection of rental properties, a building with commercial units on the ground floor, apartments above, garages that businesses paid to use, steady, reliable income. Not flashy, not public. He moved around the city by taxi and by bus. He had no car, no driver, nothing that marked him out as a man of means. He had a brother. That brother had 2 adult sons, and the old man had always known that in the natural course of things, Those two nephews stood to inherit everything he had built because he had no children of his own. He told the detectives quietly that he had always been afraid of them. "I know what they watch," he said. "They watch what I have. And I know that if they thought my death would benefit them, I would be at risk. They're family. I can't confront them. I'm scared of them." Because of this fear, he had built routines to protect himself. He never came home before dark, so they couldn't track his schedule. He kept no car in front of his house. He moved like a nobody, even though he wasn't. Then, 2 years ago, he met a woman. He was sitting in a patisserie, a neighborhood cafe, when she sat nearby and started a conversation. She was young, 26 at the time. She was warm and easy to talk to. Over the following weeks, they kept running into each other, or she made sure they did. She told him about herself. She had been married. It had ended badly. She was on her own now. Things had been hard. He listened. He opened up in return. He told her about his loneliness, about his fear of his nephews, about the fact that he had no one of his own to leave anything to. She proposed that they marry. He agreed. Before the wedding, he told his brother's sons. They were not happy. A new wife meant the possibility of children. Children meant a change in who inherited. They argued. They pushed back. But they couldn't stop him. He married her and moved with her to a new villa in the city. She had insisted they leave his old neighborhood behind and start fresh somewhere new. He paid for the villa she chose, and then, slowly, she got to work. The woman understood her husband's weakness from the start. He could not read. He could not do math. He had spent his life building wealth through hard work and instinct. But numbers on paper meant nothing to him. He handed her control of the finances without hesitation, because she was kind and she asked, and because he had no other option. His biggest asset was a large building in the old part of the city, ground floor garages and commercial units, all rented out. Apartments above also rented. It was generating consistent income and was worth, in the local market, the equivalent of roughly $200,000. She told him, "We don't need all of this. You've worked your whole life. Let's simplify. Sell what we don't use. Live comfortably. You've earned it." He trusted her. A buyer appeared, a young man in his early 30s, well-dressed, confident. He introduced himself as someone who had heard the property was for sale. He looked it over, expressed interest, and made an offer. The old man didn't know him from anywhere. The young man seemed like a stranger, a clean transaction, someone who had seen an opportunity in the market. They went to the notary together. The buyer placed cash on the table, the equivalent of about $30,000. The notary counted it. The wife counted it. The husband stood by and watched, understanding none of the numbers. The first property transferred to the buyer, then a second sale, then a third, then more. 8 properties in total, spread across several months. The detectives began tracing the money and found something that made no sense at first. Every time a property sold, the payment came in the same amount, exactly $30,000, in cash, in the same physical format, bills bundled and wrapped the same way. And after each sale, the same amount would appear back in the home, added to the stack in the room where the detectives had found the cash. They ran the transfers carefully and realized what had been happening. The buyer and the wife were working together. She had been cycling the same money in a loop. The buyer would hand over $30,000 at the notary. The husband would give it to the wife to manage. She would put it back into the stack in the room. The buyer would come back. She would hand him the same $30,000 from the stack. And the next property sale would happen using that same cash again. 8 properties sold for the equivalent of $240,000, funded entirely by money that went around in a circle. The husband had not received a cent. He had simply handed over his life's work while believing he was building toward a comfortable retirement. And to make sure he stayed asleep through the nights, she needed to move freely. She had been drugging him. Small pills, crushed and mixed into his evening meal. She cooked his dinner, put him to sleep, and left. He would wake up in the morning with a dry mouth, groggy, and remember nothing. The lead investigator had noticed something during one of the husband's interviews. He asked the old man, "Do you wake up with your mouth dry? Do you feel like you haven't rested properly?" The old man said yes. Every single morning for months. The pills were found in the house during the search. The medical examiner confirmed what they were. She had been doing this for as long as they had lived in the villa. The buyer. Once the property transfers were mapped out, his name was unavoidable. The detectives brought him back in. He had been interviewed once already. He had presented himself simply, a man who saw a good deal in the property market and took it. He said he barely knew the couple. He had no relationship with the wife. He was just a buyer. But when the detectives returned with the phone records, the cash trail, and something else, the fact that the dead woman had been living with him for over a year before her marriage, he stopped talking. They told him what they knew. She had not been a stranger. She had been his partner. He had been the one who supplied the sedative medication she used on her husband. The phone call that pulled her out of the nightclub that final night had come from him. He had a car, a common European model from the 90s that had been popular in the region, registered to him, and it had been driven and cleaned that night. The plan, as it came out in confession, once the assets were secured, she would leave her husband and come back to him. They would disappear together into whatever they had taken. But somewhere along the way, the plan changed. She had started pushing for more properties, more land, more sales. She was expanding beyond what he had calculated. Or she was becoming a liability, someone who knew everything and could, under pressure, say everything. He made a decision. That afternoon, she and her husband went to the seafood restaurant. She ordered as usual, came to the counter herself, placed the items, asked for a receipt made out for a man who would come later to pay. The buyer came, paid, and left without looking at her. She took the receipt and put it in her bag. They went home. She prepared the evening meal, crushed the pills into his food, served him dinner. He ate. Within the hour, he was deeply asleep. She got dressed, a white blouse, blue jeans, high heels. She left her main phone on the table at home. She took a second phone, a number only the buyer knew, the number that had never appeared in any record her husband could find. She went to the hotel, left her coat and bag at the coat check, gave her name, tucked the ticket into the small inner pocket of her jeans, and went inside to wait. She sat at the bar. She started drinking. After some time, she noticed a man sitting alone at a table nearby. He was in his mid-30s. He looked like someone she used to know. She walked over and asked if she could sit with him. He said yes. She sat down, looked at him, and started crying. He asked what was wrong. She said he reminded her of her brother who was gone, who had died in prison. She reached across and held him briefly, the way you hold someone you have missed for a long time. He was kind. He let her sit. They talked for a while. Then her phone rang. She looked at the screen. She stood up. She walked out of the nightclub while already talking, and she never came back. The man at the table left on his own a short time later. He had his own car in the lot and drove himself home. The cameras confirmed. She left the building in the blouse and jeans. No coat. She did not go back to the coat check. She left everything behind. The buyer was waiting in the parking area outside the vehicle entrance. She got into the car. He told her he had already collected her things from the hotel. He showed her a room key, number 119. He said they should go there now. She was drunk and relieved. She trusted him. He did not drive toward the hotel. When he had her in the car, on the dark road outside the city, he attacked her. He tried to strangle her first. Even drunk and disoriented, she fought back. So he used the knife, 2 stabs to the chest. She stopped fighting. He pulled over at a spot on the road he had chosen in advance, an area of flat gravel with no lights and no witnesses. He opened the door and pushed her out onto the ground. He searched her pockets. He took her phone. He took the cash she had on her. He checked her bag, but he did not check the small inner pocket of her jeans. The coat check ticket was still there. He drove away. He went home. He burned the knife in the kitchen and melted her phone down as well, breaking it apart and scattering the fragments in different places. Then he went to sleep. He thought it was clean. The detectives now had everything except a signed confession. They had the call records showing his number was the last to reach her. They had the property trail, the cash cycling, the history. They had the restaurant worker who could identify him as the regular man who came to pay her bills. They had the car. They brought him in for the final time. They put it plainly. We know you knew her before she married. We know the money went from the house to you and back in a loop. We know you called her that night. We know what route you drove. He tried to hold his story together. Then he asked about a specific detail, whether the coat check ticket had been found, and the question itself ended things. It had been found. It had led them to the hotel. The hotel had led them to the coat, the bag, the identity card, the receipt, the restaurant, and from the restaurant to the husband, and from the husband to the nephews, and from the nephews, eventually to the name that kept appearing at the center of everything. He confessed. He described the full scheme, the fake sales, the looping cash, the sedatives, the plan to disappear with the money, the decision to kill her, the route he drove that night, the weapon where he disposed of the evidence. Fragments of the phone were recovered from where he had scattered them. The knife had been destroyed beyond recovery. He was charged with first-degree murder, theft, and fraud. The fraud alone covered months of deliberate deception against an elderly man who could not read or count, a man who handed over everything he had in good faith, while the money was quietly handed back to the person taking it. The murder was planned. It was not a fight that went wrong. It was not a moment of panic. He chose the night, chose the location, brought a weapon, and disposed of the evidence afterward. Under the law, that is the most serious category of killing, and it carries the most serious penalty. The court sentenced him to death. He lost the 8 properties. He lost the money. He lost everything he had spent years taking. And the old man, who had spent decades afraid of the wrong people, was left to reckon with what had walked through his door wearing kindness as a disguise. Epilogue. The brother. The case had one more chapter. When the full picture came out, the old man called his brother's sons to tell them what had happened. The properties were gone. The money had been drained and cycled back out. Everything he had built was now tied up in a criminal case. The 2 brothers, who had watched their uncle's wealth disappear into a marriage they had opposed, turned on each other. The exact argument was never fully established, whether it was about money that had been quietly moved, or about who had gained what, or simply about years of pressure finally breaking. Investigators heard different versions from different people. What was certain was the outcome. The older brother struck the younger one. There was a blade involved. The younger brother died. The older brother was convicted, not of first-degree murder, which requires proof of prior intent, but of a lesser charge, causing death without the intention to kill. Under those circumstances, the sentence handed down was 20 years. The man who had originally told this story, in pieces, from inside a prison, the man described by fellow inmates as the one who remembered everything but held certain details back, was the older brother. He had served time in the same block as the buyer. He had watched his family come apart, his uncle's marriage, his uncle's assets, his brother's death, all of it. And he had carried the story with him, told it to the people around him, and eventually it found its way out. A ticket in a pocket, a name on a slip of paper. That was all it took. A coat check ticket. That was all it took. Not a confession, not a witness, not a surveillance camera catching the right moment. One small slip of paper that a killer forgot to check before he walked away. He had spent 2 years building the perfect crime, and he was undone in a single pocket search. If this case stayed with you, there are more where this came from. Cases from corners of the world that rarely make international headlines. Stories that deserve to be told. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one.